My name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. The Midwest Cyber Center of Excellence is a new not-for-profit startup organization which will partner with regional education institutions and business partners to develop a cyber workforce, implement a regional Cyber Patriot program, improve public awareness in the cyber domain, and engage in cyber-oriented research, development, and entrepreneurial activities. The formation of the Cyber Center is being led by the Leadership Council of Southwestern Illinois, along with its partners, Southwestern Illinois College, Webster University, Aegis Strategies Foundation, Clair County Illinois, and Scott Air Force Base. The Cyber Center's implementation is being led by today's guest, Jason Carter. Mr. Carter is a retired Navy commander who is currently the president and founding owner of Aegis Strategies, located at Scott Air Force Base in southwestern Illinois. During this half hour, we'll be discussing this new cyber education organization and why it is an important new institution for the St. Louis region. Jason Carter, welcome to Conversation.
Thanks for allowing me to be here, Lee.
I'm glad you're here. Actually, we've had several conversations in recent months about cyber because it has become, well, I've been hit. I've had credit cards that they call me up and say, or they send me a message, we had to cancel your card.
Yes, sir. There's actually, I think, 1.5 million cyber attacks in the United States every year. That equates to several thousand a day or 170 an hour. I hesitate, or I don't hesitate to say that from our listeners, all of them have been affected in some way or another.
Yes. And so the question I have, and I'm not sure whether I know you're organizing, setting up this thing, but I'm not sure how much about, the technicals of cyber, but why is it that the United States and our citizens are so vulnerable to these sorts of activities by criminals?
Well, in some respects, as information technology doubles in power and capability every 18 months, we're constantly playing catch up with technology. And then the way we spend our money is traditionally, at least from a guy who comes from the DoD, has traditionally been against symmetric opponents. And now we have asymmetric opponents who can attack us with a couple dollars and a laptop. And so defending against attacks from everywhere is much different than defending against attacks from a traditional large-scale state enemy.
Like the Russians.
Like the Russians or the Chinese.
Or the Chinese.
Who are also doing this, by the way. They're not ignoring the cyber sphere as well. So not only do we have ISIS and actors like that, you have state actors, and you also have individuals who are just trying to put a buck in their pocket, maybe.
Well, I understand that the Chinese government and the PLA have their own cyber institutions, like the United States does. I mean, their version of the NSA or the Cyber National Security Center, and unfortunately, they spend time attacking just to see what they can penetrate.
That's right, and it turns out that here we are in the St. Louis region, that St. Louis is one of the most attacked cities in the United States. And that's for several reasons, I think. One of them being that we have a very high concentration of the financial industry here, very high concentration of the healthcare sector in St. Louis, but also we've got Scott Air Force Base, which is the nerve center for DoD transportation. And, the United States has the best soldiers in the world. We have the best sailors in the world, best airmen and marine. We have the best technology. But really what sets us head and shoulder above our competitors is our ability to transport and project power anywhere on the United States or on the entire globe. And that nerve center happens right at Scott Air Force Base. And by necessity, it's an unclassified mission. Only 30% of the transportation that the DoD performs is by organic military assets. 70% is contracted to the DHLs, the FedExes, the UPSs
UPS,
of the world.
which which have unclassed systems.
They don't have access to our secret systems, and so while we can do some command and control on classified networks, our transportation happens on unclassified networks.
So that these organizations that you just mentioned that people use to send packages for Christmas or on other holidays or just for business, these organizations are actually being looked at by our enemies to see what sort of military stuff they're carrying, right?
Or the military systems who interface with these systems are being looked at and attacked. Because again, these systems are on the unclassified side by necessity because of how they need to interface with these commercial carriers.
So now that we've discussed how vulnerable both the military and the government and individual citizens are, now we move over to this cyber center, which you are trying to, along with a lot of other people in Southern Illinois, to establish an education institution in order to teach more young people, I guess relatively young people, how to help the United States and its businesses defend against this sort of attack. Am I getting it right?
You're getting it exactly right. And,
okay.
Cyber is a growing field. And from 2007 to 2013, a 74% increase in job postings in cybersecurity. Projected from 2012 to 2022, another 37% increase. So there's a lot more interest in this field, and the workforce isn't there to catch up. So the Cyber Center is designed to fill that gap and work with educational institutions, not only for education for young people coming up, but for workforce development for those who are already in the workforce. The ideal candidate for the Cyber Center would be someone who's got some background in IT and needs to have a layer of cybersecurity added on top of it. The data suggests that an IT individual with cyber layered on top can expect to add $15,000 a year in their salary, nationwide over just a standard IT individual.
So if you were talking to some of those kids that love to do game programming, and you're trying to convince them that maybe they might do well in this cyber industry, what would your argument be to them to get out of gaming and get into cyber, other than money?
Well, I would say not everybody can develop games, right? It's an interesting field, and the skill sets are transferable, so you actually can learn one while doing the other and vice versa. But I can say you can take your passion for gaming and for computers and combine it with a patriotism, with a love for your local region or your country, and learn to defend against these kinds of attacks.
And so let's just go back to the beginning. Where did this idea for building this education institution in and around the Scott Air Force Base or Belleville area, where did that come from?
Well, I would say maybe the first idea came from a local businessman in Belleville. His name's Kurt Ardinger, going to be a friend of his over time. Kurt bought the old YMCA building several years ago, the old Turner building, and transformed it into a beautiful renovation where he's got his business in the first floor and he's got some co-working spaces on the second floor. He looked at the Meredith building in downtown Belleville and thought, maybe we can do something similar there and bring in educational institutions. We can bring in students who are interested in living in a downtown area like Belleville offers. The millennial generation are very attracted to those kinds of scenarios where they can live, work, and play in the same space, and carve out a little niche in cyber because of the proximity of Scott Air Force Base. So Kurt took the idea to Scott Air Force Base and pitched it to the local IT leaders at Scott Air Force Base, and they were intrigued and interested. However, they're representing the federal government.
I knew there was a however.
There's a however. They're representing the federal government, and acquisition laws and all those kinds of things prevent them from dealing with one man and one idea. And so they approached the Leadership Council of Southwestern Illinois and asked the Leadership Council to look at this from a broader perspective, beyond Belleville, look at it from a regional perspective, and see what possibilities existed out there. I happen to be a board member of the Leadership Council. I'm the president and founding owner of a local defense contractor, and they asked me to lead this working group. So we put together interested parties from government, industry, education, local government agencies, and we asked the regional chamber to come in and help us, and the chamber came in, did a research report where they looked at centers similar throughout the United States, which they found were on the left coast and the right coast, down in Texas, where there's a significant cyber center down there, but nothing in the Midwest. And so between the desire to do it, the models that existed out there elsewhere, and the kind of gap in capability in the Midwest, we decided to press forward.
And so where are you now on this process? I know that it has appeared in the newspapers, and I believe you're in the process, or at least you have advertised for an executive director, so I guess you can get out and let somebody else take over the day-to-day ops.
Well, the way we got involved, Southwestern Illinois College, course in the backyard of Scott Air Force Base, perfect partner. Webster University, they have their Cyber Research Institute at Webster. They also offer educational classes right on Scott Air Force Base and on, I think, 39 other bases around the world, maybe more than that. So they were an ideal partner. No one had any money to get this off the ground. So the Aegis Strategies Foundation offered to donate the money and the space to get this off the ground. So we've put forward $200,000 actually to hire an executive director, which we are doing right now. So we made the announcement. We've formed entities in the state of Illinois, and we're working through our 501c3 status with the federal government. And we had a round of interviews last week for an executive director, and I'm actually going from here to have a second round this afternoon. We got 40 applicants, highly qualified applicants, and we narrowed it down to several for interviews, and we hope to make that selection this week.
So just for people who are hearing this when it's shown later, we are right now just about a week before Christmas 2015.
Correct.
So they have an idea of when all this stuff was going on.
Right, and so we hope to have the executive director on board in early January. We've already announced our first event, which is a cyber seniors luncheon in our offices in the center right outside Scott Air Force Base with senior military and civilian leaders at Scott Air Force Base.
So this must be pretty important to you personally, that you would put your own company's money up into this.
Well, absolutely, Lee. I'm a St. Louis native, St. Louis regional native. I grew up in the Pacific area, spent 20 years in the Navy, traveled over every line of longitude on Earth in some Navy ship along the way, and came back here, spent my last 3 years in the Navy at Scott. I built a house in Pacific and did that long drive for 3 years, thinking I would retire and get a job in West County. Started a business instead, did the long drive for another 5 years, and finally moved over here. We live over in Shiloh now. But our business is committed not only to providing excellent service to the Scott Air Force Base, other public sector, and now some private sector entities, but in contributing back to the local community. So I've got two business partners. One is retired Army. Another one's a local Southwestern Illinois resident who has no military experience. But we're combining our patriotism and our civic pride with our business. And so this was an easy thing for us to do.
So once this new executive director is hired, then I understand that he's got to go around and get things pretty much set up and work with Scott, work with the schools, do a little fundraising, I'll bet.
Yes, sir.
And so how long before you actually start training some young people in this cyber area?
Well, we're actually working some pretty exciting initiatives already where I think we'll be offering things in the spring.
Oh, really? That quickly?
Yeah.
So spring of 16, you're expecting to take off?
It's going to ramp up. You know, it'll be initial offerings in the spring. I anticipate by the fall we'll be, in high gear.
And what is it you're going to train people to do? Without being like really technical about it, but just so that the layman has an understanding of what it is that this project is going to accomplish.
Well, so there's kind of several facets to cyber, right? One of them, and maybe the most important, is cyber defense. Protecting our networks, protecting our assets against those who would attack it. Any military organization that has a defense also has an offense. And so for those gamers, maybe they can do cyber attack as well. And so the United States clearly has a mission to give as good as we get. But then there's also what's called cyber forensics. After you've been attacked, where did it come from? Who did it? How did they do it? And so those kind of three facets of the cyber community, we'll be pursuing certifications, training, and education, all those areas.
In the area of who did it, very often, we find that who did it is beyond the legal control of the United States. We're talking about who did it coming from, we mentioned China, we mentioned Russia, Eastern Europe, places like that. Isn't that right?
That's absolutely correct. And so it becomes beyond a law enforcement issue and becomes a political military issue. And so sometimes you just have to report up the chain what you find.
And then, of course, you're talking about actually hardening, military term, making sure that the systems are more foolproof than they have been. And yet, every time you hear, like, I mean, on my computer, my little laptop, you know, something comes up and says, oh, you have to update this or that little program that you're using on your, like Flash or something, because there's some hole that's developed. Just explain to people, what does that mean? A hole, what happened? Why do I have to be constantly protecting my little computer against all these bad guys?
So your computer is a piece of hardware with firmware and software associated with, and it has communications protocols. And those communications protocols allow things like email to happen, web surfing, any kind of Twitter, texting, all those kinds of things are communications protocols. Well, those communications protocols are designed to allow two-way communication between trusted assets. There's always someone seeking to exploit those protocols and get underneath them, get behind them. And so the Microsofts of the world, the Facebooks of the world, the Googles of the world, they're constantly looking at their own architectures and trying to figure out how to protect them from those bad guys.
So they wrote a line of code, but somewhere they had just one little thing that wasn't quite exactly right, and now they have to go back and close that loop.
And fix it. And so, Lee, you and I probably grew up, we didn't keep our doors locked, right, when we went to sleep at night. Most people probably lock their doors tonight in today's world. It's the same thing.
And turn on the alarm and
That's right.
have the dog running around.
It's the same thing in the cyber world. You know, when computers first came out, you didn't think too much about being attacked. Now people are thinking about it.
Mac users didn't have to worry about this until most recently. There wasn't really, for some reason, Mac users just weren't getting those kind of viruses.
I can start lots of friends on a path for that. The Mac versus PC wars.
Yes.
Yeah.
But now the Mac people are in the same situation as PC people.
Well, the user base has grown, I think, where it's become an exploitable target in some respects.
So what about like my iPhone or a Galaxy or any of the other phones? Are they vulnerable?
Absolutely, they're vulnerable. In fact, they're really just a computer that fits in your pocket. And so the same sorts of technologies are used, same sorts of software suites are used, and as the number of smartphones explodes, that becomes an exploitable target also.
And tablets.
That's
I'm
right,
sure. And tablets
same.
too.
You know, and we're talking about now the Internet of Things, right, where your toaster may have a connection to the Internet, or your locks on your home, your refrigerator.
Your garage door opener.
Right. And if these are connected, they're vulnerable. Okay, and so we're constantly going to be chasing the next set of attacks, actually, that's not going to end today, tomorrow, or in any foreseeable future.
Should people really seriously be thinking about not having this Internet of Things, of not having their toaster, not having their garage door opener, their alarm system, the cameras that they're using? You know, you see those advertisements that you can be at work and look and see who's at your front door. Should we be thinking maybe that's not such a great idea?
Well, every new capability has a risk associated with it, and we're people who manage risk. The number one cause of deaths for young people in the United States is the automobile, I believe. We all take a risk every time we get in an automobile that something bad's going to happen to us. And so just like that, the Internet of Things, there's a risk and a reward associated, and you always have to make risk-reward trade-offs.
Now, if people actually knew how many times their computer was being, I think the term is pinged, by bad people who are just checking, just walk up to your front door at the house, just checking to see if the door is locked or not, right?
That's right. Well, it's so much easier to ping your computer than it is to walk up and check on the door. Your security cameras outside your front door, your neighbors, the street,
the police,
cameras, whatever, can see you doing that.
Right.
You can do this anonymously. You can do it sitting in your home. A 12-year-old can learn these technologies and sit on his laptop and exploit these kinds of things. So not only is it the same sort of thing, but it's much easier in some respects to get away with it in today's world.
So these people who are actually watching this on YouTube, that while they're sitting here watching us on their YouTube, on their computer, in the background there could be hackers that are trying to get in.
Absolutely.
And they're trying to turn the computer into something called a zombie, so that they can then have like thousands of these computers that are all under their command and then use them to forcefully break into Scott Air Force Base.
Sometimes you don't have to break in. Sometimes you just have to deny service. A distributed denial of service, a DDoS attack, is to take these zombies, many thousands of them, and start pinging the same place all at the same time. And so you're not actually breaking in, you're just preventing legitimate traffic from going in and out because you're overloading the system.
Like going after Amazon or Netflix or whoever the enemy of the day is.
Or driving on the Beltway in Washington, D.C., where you can't get anywhere.
Yes. So, all right. Now, Scott is an integral part of this program that you're developing in this school, right? You much has said that one of the reasons you're involved in this is because Scott Air Force Base is there, and it's a very important defense asset.
So we mentioned several industries in St. Louis: the finance industry, the healthcare industry, the defense industry, others, retail, manufacturing, logistics. We don't think this cyber center is solely for the good of Scott Air Force Base. They're just the first customer right out of the gate. It's where the demand signal first came from. Once we get this off the ground and we start demonstrating the capability to produce a cyber qualified workforce, to share relevant information, to make the public aware, I firmly believe that others in the St. Louis area outside the defense community will become interested in partners.
Are you trying to make like a new Silicon Valley here?
Well, St. Louis is already a growing entrepreneurial hub. We're on the map nationally for T-Rex and the Cortex Innovation Center. It's a recognized
Explain
IT
that
hub.
to people who maybe have no clue that any of what you're talking about is happening. So let them know what you mean by all this.
So what I mean, Lee, is that and T-Rex, and it's actually named after the old Transportation Railroad Exchange building where it was founded. There are a number of entrepreneurial businesses who are co-located with mentor organizations, with angel investors, with venture capitalists, with universities who are there and willing to train them. And so you've got this entrepreneurial ecosystem that started at T-Rex, I believe. Cortex brought in Washington University, St. Louis University, and others. There's an organization in there called Launch Code that President Obama mentioned during his State of the Union address. It was right here in St. Louis. And so St. Louis is actually very much on the map for the amount of startup businesses and entrepreneurial activity. Okay, that's mostly on the St. Louis side of the river. Southwestern Illinois wanted to play in that game and said, you know what, we don't need to compete with our brethren on the other side of the river. Let's carve out our own niche. And so cyber is our niche over here on the Southwestern Illinois side. And we see it being collaborative and complementary to what's going on in St. Louis.
Well, here in the last 5 minutes that we still have, why don't we dive into that a little bit more about the entrepreneurial nature of what you're trying to accomplish here.
So I mentioned Kurt Ardinger. His original vision was actually to start with the entrepreneurial piece of this and start with the co-working piece of this. It involved a physical location that was bigger than what we're offering today at Aegis, and probably an investment that was estimated at $4 or $5 million to get it off the ground. So in our first phases, we're focused on workforce development. We want to demonstrate the ability to prove out this concept and to provide a valuable service to the region. Once that happens, we anticipate attracting more investors beyond Aegis Strategies. I'm already getting phone calls from other companies who are interested in investing in and playing in this space. Once we get that locus of activity and some investment energy in the center, then doing things like entrepreneurial contests for cyber technologies, those kinds of things, that's very easily just maybe 1 to 3 years down the road with the center. All it takes is some interested people and some vision, and we think there's a lot of those on the Southwestern Illinois side.
And the DoD contracts that could be offered in order to accomplish certain tasks, that could be helpful in getting some of these businesses off the ground.
Right, actually, yes. If you're interested in cybersecurity, then the public sector and the Department of Defense in particular has to be a strategic target for you with respect to your business goals. And there's a lot of that going on at Scott Air Force Base. One organization alone, United States Transportation Command, spends over $400 million a year on IT.
In just the last couple of minutes here, the NGA, that's a football that could land in the Missouri side, it could land in the on the Illinois side. What is that, and why would it be a good idea to place it near Scott Air Force Base, in your opinion?
So NGA is the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. I don't know why we didn't call it NGIA, but we call it NGA. It's the old Defense Mapping Agency. And so
that's how I knew it.
That's right. That's a lot of St. Louisans know it as the Defense Mapping Agency. So it's got 2 campuses, one on Arsenal Street, not far from the brewery, and another down in Arnold. The one on Arsenal Street has outlived its life there, and of course they're looking to put it 4 other places, either on Tesson Ferry Road, on the old Chrysler facility out in Fenton, and North St. Louis on the old Pruitt-Igoe, or at Scott Air Force Base. And so that mission is an intelligence mission. Satellites, mapping, gathering information in a highly classified way and making it available to the DoD and federal agencies. Having it co-located with the security of Scott Air Force Base, having it right next to the customer at Scott Air Force Base, I think makes a lot of sense.
And a lot of open fields out there for extra growth, whereas in the city you're kind of already blocked in. It's going to cost considerable if you have to buy the land next door.
St. Clair County offered the land to the agency for free. And I believe they've also offered to extend MetroLink all the way out to the facility as well. So I'm a Missouri native. I live in Illinois today. I like to think of myself as unbiased in this regard. I think it makes too much sense to put it at Scott Air Force Base.
There's a lot of people who secretly, quietly have said that to me too, and we're talking Missourians as well. Well, we've just about run out of time. We've really covered this topic pretty well. You think anything last second? Anything you wanted to say?
Last second, I just think that in a year or 2, you're going to hear a lot about the Midwest Cyber Center of Excellence, and we're going to be providing excellent services, not only to Scott Air Force Base, but to the rest of the St. Louis region and those who are interested in protecting their assets.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Appreciate you being here. And I've been speaking with Jason Carter from Aegis. He and a bunch of other people are in the process of trying to create the Cyber Center of Excellence in the Southern Illinois area near Scott Air Force Base, Belleville, Illinois, for those of you who are familiar with the area. This is going to be uploaded to YouTube so you can show it to your friends if they've missed it. We'll see you next time. Thank you.